Hi, Steve Matthews here, Pentagram Motorsport. I know it's been that long since I've done a video. My hair's gone even more grey than it was on the first videos. Anyway, quick update for you. This car here, this GTI, is getting recommissioned. There's all kinds of stuff that needs to happen with it. One of the things that happened is I threw a new clutch at it 18 months ago. That lasted all of about 2 months. So buy cheap, buy twice, I guess. And I've got the, let me show you what the front suspension and brakes look like. As you can see, they're not actually here. They're in the workshop. So I've stripped this all down. There's no shafts on it. I've just got the bare hubs. That's the ABS wiring and the brake caliper still attached. So at the moment you can see I've got the clutches pretty much off, the gearboxes on the floor, the engine's not actually connected to any mounts other than the offside chassis rail, and this pipe here has been dripping and leaking, and they're very vulnerable to corrosion, and they're only mild steel. Bear in mind this is a 1997 car, so yeah, I'll be doing the clutch on it. I've got a little bit of welding to do underneath. Let me show you here where the jacking point is. When I jacked it up, the jack went straight through, so I'm going to have to do a bit of welding up in this section here. My hand's going into a hole there, which you probably can't see. We're going to refurb the suspension, we're going to rebuild the brakes. Excellent. So it looks like VW Heritage have really done the business there and sent us the right part next day and got it here before noon. How good is that? So these are all the little bits that I've taken off during the course of stripping it that need to be cleaned. Obviously there's some big bits as well, I'll clean them separately, but I'm going to get to work and clean these now. So you've got this rusty pipe off, and if you look on the underside, there is actually just here.
What is actually there?
A pinhole. Can you see that?
Pinhole.
There, where my finger is. You see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where all that water was leaking from. Hi there, we're on day 2 of the GTI refurbishment. I've got my helper with me here. This is Richie.
And I'm holding a tall wrench.
You are, and what else have you got?
Some special glue.
That is thread lock, and we're going to refit the bolts that hold the clutch onto the end of the crankshaft, which I shall show you now. And the correct torque for those, stage 1 is 44 foot-pounds or 60 newton meters. Stage 2 is plus 90 degrees, so a 90-degree turn from where it clicks at 44 foot-pounds. And this stuff here is thread lock. We're going to put a little smear of that on each of the bolts before we torque them up.
We've cleaned all of these bolts.
Ready to get some thread lock on them and go back on the car.
And here's another
There's
one of them.
6 in total.
Here's another. And here's another. And here's another. And that's how much there is. Quite a lot.
Okay, so we've torqued these 6 nuts up to the initial 44 foot-pounds. We're now going to put an extra 90 degrees on each of them. This is the clutch release mechanism, so when you put your foot on the clutch pedal, there's a long rod, and that goes in the centre of this piece here, and then that spreads the excuse me, the fingers on the clutch around here. So the way that this works is that sits in that piece there. Once that's in, there's a spring ring, a sprung clip ring that retains it. So that's, I'll show you on the old part, this ring here sits inside of that and pings into you pop them into those 2 holes with a screwdriver, and the outside lugs, these sit on the inside, over over the top of that retaining ring like that. The one on the right is the one that came with the cheap clutch kit. Notice it's just pretty much flat piece of metal. The one on the left here is the replacement, which is actually a higher quality component, and you can notice it's got these pieces here, it's got these little indents here, and it's got this centre piece where it's all sort of pressed in with a machine piece in it. So yeah, like I say, buy cheap, buy twice. So the assembly order here, the friction piece sits here, and then over the top of all of that, so that is handed, and that should be assembled that way round. So that's the gearbox side that sticks out, engine side's pretty much flat, and then over the top of all of that you have this piece here, which is the flywheel, and you can see the ring gear for the starter motor there. And when you fit that in, you'll notice on the back of it there are some keys, like this key here, and that key's, excuse me, that key's a receptor in here somewhere, so you've got to get it lined up correctly. So let's put it all back together. That's that fitted in place, and it skewers by this ring that goes round under these pieces, and I put a little smear of grease in the middle. I've also put the tiniest smear of grease on the back of this where it actually touches the fingers that open the clutch. Okay, so now I've added the friction disc, and on the outside of that I've put the flywheel on. I've just put 3 bolts in it so far. Obviously there's a full set of 9 to go in, but I have this point, you can see that he's able to move in there. So what I intend to do next is centre that disc. So what I'll do is I will use my verniers, and I will measure a distance from the centre of this, sorry, the edge of this on the friction disc to a fixed point on the outside the flywheel. And I can't give you an actual number for this. All I can tell you is it wants to be the same, because what you're doing is centering it. So across all 4 aspect faces, right, centered. So that one, for example, needs to come up that way a little bit. Obviously, if these are too loose, it'll keep dropping down. So you can tighten them up and add more bolts. When you've got that centered, that's the time when you would actually torque all 9 of these up. Okay, so that's all centered. You've got all 9 of these fitted. It's actually 15 foot-pounds or 20 newton meters for the 020 GTI gearbox. Check your manual if you work on a different gearbox type. So there we go, clutches on and centered, tightened up, torqued up appropriately, and the next thing to do, lift the gearbox, bring the engine and gearbox together, which is usually easier said than done on these cars. So I'm going to struggle with this for the next however long, and then I'll update any video once the gearbox is actually fully back on. That's it. We're now at the end of day 4. I do realise that I've missed day 3. Good reason for that. Tomorrow the car is going for MOT, except it isn't. It's we've had to push that back, and I'll explain why. So yesterday, just a big push to get it finished. So we struggled on, got the gearbox fitted on day 2, and day 3 we bolted up the gear linkage and the drive shafts and the suspension and the brakes and, you know, basically everything that hangs off the front end of the car. Torqued it all down, what have you. Got it back on its wheels, and one of the things that I noticed as I was putting together is that one of the drive shafts sounded a little bit clicky, which I was quite annoyed about, but never mind. You can't expect everything to work first time on a car that's 23-year-old. The next thing that happened, so we dragged it out and turned the key, and it just went click. And reason for that, pulled the checked all the wiring at the starter, bypassed the wiring at the starter, wouldn't spin, which was annoying, because I'd had actually turned the engine over by hand with a 19mm socket on the end of the crankshaft to make sure it wasn't seized, and it wasn't. I thought it was a bit stiff and I couldn't figure out why, but it would turn over. So we push started it, fired up after a few bumps and jumps, and the engine ran really well. At which point my wife jumped in and turned it round, drove it up to park it up, and said, "Oh, the steering's very heavy." I thought it might be the power steering pump level was low or something like that. Anyway, didn't think anything more about it. So today, the photographs that you're seeing on the screen here are the before and after shots. We've had it. Our valet came professionally detail it, and he did an absolutely cracking job because it was horrible inside. There was mould on the seat belts. You pull the seat belts out, and it was nasty. So he's done a really good job. That's Crystal Clean in County Durham. Look him up. He's a really interesting guy. He used to own a DeLorean, along with all kinds of other vehicles, and he's come and done an absolutely fantastic job on the car, as you can see from the photographs. So my wife quickly nipped to Euro Car Parts and grabbed a CV joint to throw on the clicky shaft, and we had to spin the car around. So we push started it again, and as I spun it round, I noticed that the alternator light didn't go out, and the steering was heavy. And so jacked it up to A, pull the starter motor off, and B, do the CV joint, and noticed that the serpentine belt was missing, and that the belt for the power steering was completely shredded, snapped in two, and wrapped around the pulley for the power steering pump. And yeah, it's been one of those days. Never mind. So as you can see from the photo there, that's my little one carrying the remains of the alternator, because the alternator is pretty much seized. And when I thought about it, I remember that when the car was in use last year, it did have some noisy alternator bearings. So clearly they've just given up the ghost completely. That alternator is locked solid. So I've managed to get hold of another alternator. I've got a new belt coming. I actually had in stock a belt for the pass pump, but I'm not going to put that on because you have to put that on after the serpentine belt. So there's no point putting it on and taking it off again. So we've had to push the MOT back, so that's happening next week now. So yeah, I'll make another video with all the capers next week, and hopefully we actually get a car that starts on a key and doesn't click whenever you turn left, and yeah, doesn't that actually puts out its battery light. But on the plus side, it looks fantastic. So yeah, that's kind of it for this update, and hopefully next video should actually be properly on the road, and we shall see you then. Thank you very much for watching.